So good. So, hey, hello to you guys again online if you're joining us, and hello to you guys in the room as well. If this is your first week here for our marriage series, then a bigger welcome to you again. We are 3 weeks in on a marriage series called The Happy Marriage. So this has really been exciting. I know that a lot of our leaders and team as well watch this back later on. Maybe they're serving around the church and that kind of a thing. So if you're watching this back then, why don't you just drop #replay in the comments as well. We'd love to know if you're watching back a bit later. The Happy Marriage. This is awesome. It's been such a great series. Who's enjoying this so far? Who's getting something out of this? I know me personally, I'm getting so much from this as well. It comes from a book that is written by Pastor Darren Chapman. Now, he's a pastor of C3 Victory in Newcastle, in New South Wales. And it's such a great book. It's a really great book. It's very small. It's a guy-sized read, I call it. I know there's some guys that like reading, but for me, I'm more of an audio guy. I like absorbing things by audiobook. And it's available by audiobook as well if you prefer that. So make sure you check it out. Week 1, we talked about connection. Pastor David had a phenomenal message on connection. If you missed it, check it out online. It was so good. Last week, we talked about unity. And this week, week 3, we're talking about vision. Vision in our marriage and in our relationships. So good. And our scripture, our locating scripture this Sunday is Proverbs 29:18. And we'll look at the King James Version of this. And this is what the King James Version says. It says, where there is no vision, the people perish. Where there is no vision, the people perish. And I think this is so true in our marriages, right? Unless there's vision, we perish. I think it's so true in business. It's so true in so many areas of our life, but also in our marriage. For Jackie and I, we had a kind of long drawn out vision, I guess, at the start of our marriage, which was to get married. And that went on for some time. If you've known us for a little while, maybe you were here in the church when we were going through this 6-year journey. I know Sally and Elma particularly will remember that one. That was a long process. But what ended up happening is we knew within a couple of weeks of starting to date, we knew we wanted to get married, right? We were like, yeah, we're going to get married. This is the thing. It's going to happen. And then we started to ask God for when, and God said, not yet. And then we asked again, and God said, not yet. And then I asked again, and God said, not yet, not yet, not yet. And that kept going for about 6 years. I kid you not. And the thing is, like, over these 6 years, I would like try and pull all my finances together to get to save up for a ring and do all that kind of stuff. And then out of nowhere, some crazy expense would come in, and I wouldn't have the money to buy it anymore. Or I would try and there was this one time I actually started to plan like a secret wedding. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to do this. We're just going to have it. Jackie won't even know. It'll just happen on the day. I was just getting so frustrated. And I tried to do it. And something completely railroaded that too. I kid you not. There was one particular place that I actually tentatively booked. And then one of our other family relatives actually booked that place to get married there. And I was like, you're kidding me. This is crazy. And it was so clear in prayer that God was just shutting this down, going, it's not time yet. This is not your time. You're not following my vision. This is the vision I've got for your marriage, and you're not following it. And so that kept happening, and I kept disobeying God through that. And it was a hilarious time. But it was also as Jackie's crying in the front row, going, it was a painful time, because I know that she was going through that with us as well, and it was full on. But look, marriage gives us the ability to do, experience, and achieve so much together. I'm just going to turn my timer on before I forget so that I'm not talking to you guys all day. But the other thing it does is it also gives us the ability to achieve what each of us want to achieve as well. Because it's not just about what we're achieving together, but it's about what we're achieving apart as well. And that's just as important. But when we are together, our resources are so much better. As an example, if we both have an income, right, our cash flow is automatically higher. We can then do more, we can experience more, we can holiday more, we can enjoy our lives more than if we had just one single income, right? Together, just like with finances, our load management can be a lot better too. We can, divide up the household chores. We can work on a better synergy to life together. When we add our love and we serve and we sacrifice for one another, that's when we empower each other to achieve our personal goals and our together goals. That's when that happens. Now, this is a massive topic, and yet again, just like last week, today, we're just scraping the surface of how much content is in this book. It is a phenomenal book. Like I said, it's a short read, but it's so content heavy, and it is amazing. So make sure that you get the book, grab the audiobook, check it out. It's so great. But going back to our locating scripture again, where there is no vision, the people perish, Proverbs 29:18. This is so true in our marriages. And we don't want your marriage to perish. I don't want your marriage to perish. So we've got to actively work on that. The church is married to Jesus. I don't know if you've heard that concept before, maybe you haven't, but when you're married to someone and you have a vision together, then you're going to work on achieving that. And our vision here is to see 1,000 worshippers by 2032 in C3. But the question is, how do we build vision in our marriages? What are some common barriers that we're going to come up against? And what do we need to do if our vision gets off track? How do we get that back on track, right? Well, the good news is that Pastor Darren has literally a whole chapter in the book dedicated to vision. And this is so, so important. So how do we build vision in our marriages, right? Well, the first thing that he says is that you plan to go in the same direction. You plan to go in the same direction. Now, that seems pretty straightforward, right? But at the same time, it can be really easy to get off track with that. It can be really easy. So don't just plan for the same destination. Plan to actually travel the same route. Because there's a difference ending up somewhere at the same time as someone else. But it's a whole different thing if you've traveled in the same car as them, right? Who's done a big road trip and done it? You know, I know sometimes with Jackie and I, we've gone on a road trip with another couple, and the guys are going in one car and the girls are going in one car. And you get to the same place, but the conversation in the car has been totally different, right? You've had a whole different experience on the way there. So you ended up in the same place, but you've had a whole different journey there. So make an intentional goal to take the same route. You've got to be in the same car together, right? But this is what Pastor Darren says. He says, vision is the long-term relationship stabilizer. It's the stabilizer to relationship, right? Vision. If you've got a future focus together and you're focused on the same thing, then you're going to be in parallel together. Again, where there's no vision, people perish. My next question for you is, what's your 50-year plan? And you're kind of going, what? I know, right? I don't even know what I'm having for dinner yet. What's your 50-year plan? You're like, really? Come on, Brad. Seriously? That's ridiculous. But no, seriously, this is important, right? 50-year plan. This is what Pastor Darren says. He says it's so important to not only just have a relationship where you're just, legally married and living in the same house and you kind of see each other every so often, but it's so important to actually have a quality relationship because it's about that journey, right? I don't know about you, but in 50 years, I want to be laughing with Jackie. I want to be having fun with her. I want to be dreaming together still. I want to be, literally living out some of our dreams. I want to be having great sex, if that's possible at 80. I don't know. Probably. I hope so. I'm not 80 yet. We'll see. One of the biggest problems in marriages that separates us, though, is drift. Has anyone ever heard that concept before? Like when you set yourself up on the beach and you're swimming for a while and then you look back and suddenly behind you is not your stuff. It's like all the way back over there. And you're like, what happened? We've drifted, right? And the thing is about drift, you don't even realize it's happening. You don't know you're drifting until you suddenly look up and you go, hang on, what? And some of the phrases that, we hear sometimes is we're just going in different directions. We heard each other and we drifted apart after that. Or we're just not in the same space. We don't want the same things anymore. Man, don't let it get to that. Don't let it get to that. We've got to be so intentional about that, right? We've got to actively plan to travel the journey together to make sure that you both got a hand on that wheel in that car. Because if you're there now, then what Darren recommends, he recommends going back to connection. Go back to week 1. Start with connection and then get to unity. Don't worry about the vision stuff yet. Start with the connection and get some unity happening. That's where it all begins. But how do you make sure that you actually travel that journey together, right, over time? How do you do that? Well, what he recommends doing is asking good questions. That's the first thing, is asking good questions. One of those questions could be, stuff like, what kind of a marriage do we actually want? What kind of a marriage do we actually want? And one thing that I know a lot of experienced couples, particularly in the church and also out of the church, have told me over the years is something to do is have a regular date night. Super basic, but have a regular date night as much as you can. I know sometimes we have the perception that, we date our spouse and we get married and then we don't date anymore. But that's totally not the case. We need to continue dating our spouse right the way through our marriage, right? So a regular date night, if you can do it once a week, great. If you start with once a month, great. Do a regular date night. And I mean, Jackie and I are guilty. We probably don't do this anywhere as much as we should, but it's something that we want to make an intentional goal to do more of, is date your spouse. But if you start here and you have some intentional questions to ask on your date night, and you've got to both know that when you go out to this date night, it's going to be a time to work on this together. Because that's the first thing we have to think about is the expectations. And we spoke a bit about that last week, but what are the expectations of what you're going to be doing on your date night? You've got to be on the same page with this, right? But some questions that you could ask each other is, what kind of a marriage do we actually want to build together? Do we want adventure? Do we want to travel? Do we want a close family? What are our goals? Do you want a culture of openness and peace and love in our home? What are we building? What do we want out of this life? And how can we make sure, and this is a really important question, how can we make sure that we are staying on parallel tracks this whole time? How can we make sure that we're actively going to make sure that we journey together? Because it's so easy to let that go off track. Pastor Darren gets really real and he says, let's be real, you're as close as you both want to be. And that can be some hard-hitting truth sometimes. But that's how he says it. Has your level of vulnerability and openness slowed over the years? If so, now's the time to reboot that. How close do you want to be? That's what he says. And I love that. Connection and unity are so important, but it's so easy to still drift without a shared vision, right? Because you can still be connected and you can even still have unity, but you might not have vision. The next thing you've got to do is commit to having tough conversations. Darren's code for this is, and this is funny because he talks about it in the book, but what he says is he has a code word that he and his wife use. They both use this code word. Whenever they decide they need to talk about something, they have this code. And this is what it says. It's almost funny. It's like, in the interest of open communication. And that's how they start every time. So then the other person automatically knows straight away. That's the code word for we need to have a chat. That's when it's happening. And sometimes having a circuit breaker like that can be so helpful, right? Because sometimes you just don't know how to start that conversation. Sometimes you're just going, I don't know how to actually say this. And you might go weeks before you find a moment. But at least if you've got a regular phrase that you've both agreed on, then that's a really great way to do that. You've also got to commit to doing the work. Because in the same way the Bible says faith without works is dead, the same applies for vision. Vision needs action, especially when it's a joint vision, right? You've got to commit to loving each other so deeply. And 1 Peter says this, 1 Peter 4 says, above all, love each other deeply because love covers a multitude of sins. Now it says covers, not hides. It says covers. Offer hospitality to one another without grumbling. Each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others. And this can be each other. You can be serving each other through this, right? Use whatever gift you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms. Darren then talks about 3 kinds of vision. There's 3 kinds of vision that are really important for us to understand. Sometimes we might just think vision is just one thing, but there's actually 3 levels of it. There's my vision, there's their vision, my spouse's vision, and there's also our together vision, right? There's the 3 levels of that. And all 3 need to exist, and all 3 need to be so healthy, right? One thing Pastor Darren says, and I found this funny, I kind of agree with it on some level, is that holidaying apart is weird. He just says, man, it's so weird when people go on holidays separate. It's like, all right, we're going to book 2 weeks annual leave, but you're going to go here, and I'm going to go here. I don't know if that sounds like a holiday to me. That's kind of weird. And that's exactly what he says. He says holidays, family events, and bucket list goals or anything that will fulfill a dream should be done together. And that's really important. And he actually says why. This is why, right? Strong memories and experiences together will create unity. And this will create intimacy. Because if you've got shared experiences, you've actually gone through them together. If you go through them solo and you experience it by yourself, you're actually in a separate car. You're not traveling with your spouse. And that's so important. It's good to have some things together, and it's good to have some things apart. Small doses apart is good, but if it becomes the normal and you're doing everything by yourself, then that's not so good. Also, empowering each other is really good as well. If I was away for work and, maybe I was in Perth or something like that, and there was a great band coming through that I love watching, if they were playing and I wanted to see it, I know Jackie would encourage me to go and see the band. Even if we didn't have much cash at the time, she would say, go and watch the band. They're there. Check it out. And I know I would do exactly the same for her, right? Not every goal you have is going to line up. It's not always going to match between the two of you, right? But it's still so important for us to empower our spouse to say, no, you go ahead and do it. Genesis 2:18 says, the Lord God said, It is not good for man to be alone. I will make a helper suitable for him. God intended for us to do life together. And we need a healthy balance of my goals, of their goals, and together goals. But the bottom line is, if you can do it together, you absolutely should. If it's something that you both like and you can do it together, you should. Absolutely. And this brings me to my second point. Breaking barriers. What kind of barriers do we come up against in our marriages? What's some barriers that we see? Darren lists two main barriers that we see. And the first one is not thinking togetherness. So this is not being on the same wavelength, right? Not thinking togetherness. So what he says is that it's really important to note you're not two solo humans living in the same house and having sex sometimes. That's not the goal of this. You're married and there's a powerful oneness. There's a powerful closeness and connectedness that comes with this, right? And we need to think really differently compared to when we were single. You can't go into a marriage with a single mentality. That won't work. That's not the point in it. And when we're married, our decision-making needs to really include our spouse. Now, this is not at the level where, we need permission to breathe, leave the house, or buy a coffee. That's not what we're talking about here. That's not the goal. But there should be a really sweet balance zone between where we keep each other in the loop and when we still get the okay to talk about some of the bigger things. It could be the calendar. It could be the budget. It could be anything that inconveniences the other person. But we should still have the freedom to make our own decisions as part of that. So it's a balance zone, right? Darren also says this. When me goals undermine your intimacy or your us goals, they become harmful. When me goals undermine your intimacy or your us goals, they become harmful. Now, what does that mean? That means maybe upgrading your qualifications or playing a team sport. They're great. They're awesome things. But the question is, do they undermine the us goals? Because it could be really good for your health. It could be great for so many things. But if they're undermining your intimacy or your us goals, then they're actually probably causing you more damage than good. And the second thing he says, the other barrier, is not vocalizing your dreams. Because sometimes we neglect to share our dreams with our spouse. We might think, that's not as important. I kind of want to make sure their goal happens or our together goal happens. But you've still got to share it because it's dangerous. This will undermine all of the work that you're doing to create intimacy and togetherness because you're not being honest with them. You're not on the same page, and that will help you build resentment because you'll be going, man, I just wish I could do my thing. And then your heart goes aside, right? It's so dangerous. So you've got to share that. You've got to share that. Even if it's something you two chat together and you table it and go, that's later, that's fine. But the point is you've still got to get it out there. You've got to get it out there. You both really need a healthy awareness of what your spouse wants to achieve, both solo and with you. And sometimes it helps to have a way to set this up. A bit like the date night. Or a line that says, hey, maybe, man, I need to tell you something and you've got to promise not to laugh. I just need to say something to you. Is now a good time for that? Or can we chat at a date night? Or is there something? You've got to have a way of getting that out there. That's so important. And it's important to think about this stuff in advance. Because in the moment you won't. And then it gets slid under the table. And I know I'm great at that. So rebuilding vision. How do we get our vision back on track if we've maybe gone the other way for a bit? What do we do? Well, the first thing we need to do is we have to ask ourselves internally. We have to say, are we moving together? Are we moving together? Do I feel like me and my spouse, do I feel like we're moving together at the moment? But all vision needs four things. The first thing is togetherness, which we've talked about, and vocalizing your dreams, which we've already talked about as well. And the next two things is future planning and regular check-ins. So firstly, timing is everything. Don't talk future when you're finding it hard to talk about the present. That's the first thing, is if you're frustrated, you're hurt, maybe you're over busy at the moment, you're disconnected, it's not a good time to talk about dreams or future because you're really not going to give it the thought that it needs at that point. During family meals when, one of your kids is pegging spoons at the other kid, that's probably not a good time. True story, happened the other night. Or maybe just after you've gone to bed, who's guilty for that? Waiting for the partner to get in bed and then you're like, hey, so here's my list. Who's guilty for that? I think there's one in every relationship, right? You get to that point, you're like, I'm just going to wait till they're in bed and then, all right, let's have a chat. Not a good time. Man, not a good time. especially if it's after a stressful week. You've got to make an intentional time to meet, to talk about it, so you don't get ambushed on either side. If in your current season of now, maybe this is too hard, then like I said before, just go back to connecting. Week 1, connection. That's where it all starts. Connection and unity. That's where this all begins. That's where it starts. You've got to laugh and have each other's company and just get connected and just get through what you're going through. Get your stuff sorted, get on the same page, and then come back to this later. Once you feel more one than you were before, once you feel together and connected, then you can start building on the rest of this. If you're good to go, then it's really just about working out what suits you both. And some people are different. This is really important as well, because I believe that in some couples, people are very different because opposites attract, right? So some of you might prefer a structured, booked-in time. You might think, yeah, we're going to do a date night. That'll work really well for me. Or maybe you're the kind of person that just likes to organically discuss something. Maybe that works better for you. Maybe you can just chat about it whenever. You don't need to put any kind of extra thought into it. But the thing is, you may be opposites here. You might be complete opposites. And to the other person, having a structured time might seem just too rigid. Or maybe it just feels like I'm not very good at open conversations. I need to put some pre-thought into this. So what you need to do is actually discuss this with your partner and actually decide which one is going to work for you guys. But this will really help you to level up your vision. Having healthy conversations will really help with that. The other thing vision does is it keeps you accountable. Vision will really help you adjust back to what you agreed on. If you've made a vision for something, then this will help you come back to it. It keeps you accountable. And how does it do that? Well, what it does is it gives you a platform to say, hey, remember we're saving for that big holiday that we agreed on. That was our vision. Like, that was our goal. We're saving towards that. Maybe it's not a good time that we buy this new lounge suite. Like, it kind of helps you with those conversations. Talking about and agreeing on what we want will help us to stick to the plan. The other thing it will do is give you another platform to say things like, we agreed to talk about it even when it's tough. Okay then, in the interest of open communication, you could also have a platform to say something like, you know how we agreed to never stew on something for more than 2 days? Can we chat? That's really important as well. It's important to have those phrases where you both know what's coming up so you can help. Pastor Darren also says to make future plans. And plans aren't just vocalized wishes, they're actually commitments. And this is going to be up to what works for you, because this is different for everyone. I know for Jackie and I, when where we're headed, we like to just make decisions along the way. We know where we're headed, and we're going to make some conscious decisions on the way to get there. We're not super strict and structured. We don't kind of, have quarterly family KPIs that we keep and tick off. But some people are like that, and that's totally cool. There's nothing wrong with that. But then again, you might be opposites. So again, it's so important to vocalize that and just say, well, how does this work for you? What do you need to feel like we're ticking the boxes to get to our vision? Do you need a structured piece of paper that gives me my tick boxes? Or is a more relaxed approach cool? Whatever level of detail works for you is great, but just make sure you're still on track and you're checking in regularly on this. What Pastor Darren also says is when you first establish your future plans, it's important to ask the right questions. And this could be a date night again. You could head out on a date night. Maybe if a night is too hard, maybe you could go out for a coffee. You could go out for lunch, something like that. But the question is, what are we building together? These are some of the questions she says to ask. What are we building together? Is that truly what we want? What actually needs to change for us to get there? What do we want out of this life? What experiences are important for us to have together? And what's okay to have separately? What's important to me? What do I want to be there for on the journey? Are we going in the same direction? Is there anything we need to correct in order to move together better? And he also recommends writing these things down together as a couple. Because when you do that, that's when you can move forward on it. And it also gives you something to come back to. Remember, a vision is just a dream without action attached to it. The last thing he says to do is have regular vision check-ins. and this is so important, we've kind of unpacked this a little bit just then, but he goes into more detail and he says, you want to make sure that you stay on track. There's no point in agreeing on something and then not talking about it for 20 years, right? That's not helpful at all. You've got to ask yourselves, are we on track? Is this track what we actually want? Are we moving in the right direction? And he's just checking in every few months on this, at least. You could even say, hey Siri, remind me every 3 months to set up a date night, to talk about stuff with my spouse, dreams and goals and visions. I mean, you could even do it now, go for it. Not one person wanted to chat to Siri. That's a shame. But the purpose is really just to stay on the same track, right? But the main goal out of all of this is really, really important. This is the goal of the whole book. The goal is intimacy. You've got to make a decision together that this is what you're going to pursue. Because that's what it's about. It's about building intimacy every day, every week, every month, every year. We need to be building intimacy in our marriages. And you've got to decide this up front. You've got to decide together that this is what we're going to do. Because in the middle, when things are going down, the last thing you're going to want to do is come back to that. That's when it's the hardest, isn't it? That's when it's hard. But to get unstuck, Pastor Darren says, connect, unity, vision, which builds intimacy. That's how we get there. That's how we get there. Even when you're overwhelmed, you're withdrawing, you're feeling distant, maybe you're annoyed or angry at your spouse, you've got to make a decision that we're going to seek intimacy. That's what we're going to do. Darren says the 3 goals of marriage is intimacy, growth, and fruit. Intimacy, you're walking close together. You grow together for growth. And you make a contribution to the world, which is your fruit. If intimacy is truly both your unified, overarching goal, then it will help you walk through any other problems in your marriage as well. If you've got intimacy already, it gives you a platform to talk through stuff. And I really believe that we can grow closer over any problem as long as intimacy is the goal on both sides. That's the key. Connection, unity, and vision is what's going to bring us to our goal of intimacy in our marriages. And that's so good. But here's the deal. For us, we've got to make a commitment to building intimacy. We can't just get this information or download and then do nothing with it. And then we come to church next week, ready for the next thing. That doesn't help. We've got to actually put some of this stuff into practice. We've got to make a decision and a commitment to our spouse to work together on building a better marriage, right? Would you stand to your feet this morning? In our marriages, there's our spouse and there's us, but there's also a third person, and that's Jesus. Without Jesus, we can't have solid, robust marriages, and that's what we're here to build, right? We're here to build solid, robust marriages that go the length, that go the distance, with a 50-year goal, even longer if you can. That's great. But unless we really have Jesus in our marriage, we really can't be as strong as we need to be. Ecclesiastes 4:12 says, though one may be overpowered, 2 can defend themselves. A cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken. 3 strands. That's yourself, Jesus, and your spouse. It's a 3-way relationship, and that's so, so important. So this morning, I'm going to give you the opportunity, if you've never given your heart to Jesus, maybe this is your first step. Maybe this is the first thing you need to do is say, you know what? Today I want to make the decision. I want to say, hey, Jesus, come and be in my marriage. Come and be in my life. Come and be in my heart. Come and guide my life. Maybe that's you. It might be your very first time being here. The second kind of people I want to pray for this morning is someone that may have been with Jesus once before and then you've kind of slipped away and decided, you know what, I need to come back to Jesus. I knew him. I've had him in my life, but I want to come back to him. That might be you. Or the third kind of person I want to pray for this morning is someone that maybe you know Jesus, you know God, you believe in God, but you're just not sure if you're going to heaven. I want to pray for you as well this morning just to give you a surety that you are going to heaven. So we're going to say this prayer together for the benefit of all of those who've never prayed this before. Why don't we just close our eyes and bow our heads? I believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God and the Savior of the world. I believe he died and rose again to forgive my sin and give me life. I receive your grace by faith. Come into my life. Make me new. I'll follow you. That's so good. Can we congratulate anyone that may have just prayed that prayer for the first time? Come on, let's have a big round of applause this morning. That's so good. If that's you, then we really want to connect with you. We want to help you on this journey. So please come and find someone you've seen on stage or pop into the info bar after the service. We'd love to help you on this journey and help you with some resources for this.
Hey, thank you so much for watching. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss a thing from our channel.
And share with a friend, because you never know who you're going to bless.
You can also catch us live every Sunday morning at 9:30 a.m. Australian Western Standard Time. We'd love to see you there.